Have you thought this through?
No way will that work.
Are you sure? Is there any money in that?
You'll never make any money doing that. How are you going to pay the mortgage? Just get a job.
You're going to try to tell that? Why can't you be normal like everybody else?
All right. Were your parents morons too?
The savvy entrepreneur to the rescue.
Congratulations. That really turned out well.
Really good job.
I'm going to admit it. I'm surprised.
You know, I wish I thought of that.
I never thought anyone would. How did you do that?
I'm so glad you're pursuing your dream.
I wish I had the courage to follow my dreams.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur Show. We're broadcasting on WLCB 101.5 FM, based here in the greater Chicago, Milwaukee area. If you're an entrepreneur or a small business person or thinking about being one, this show is for you. I'm Doris Nagel, your host for the next hour. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've also advised startups and small businesses for the past 30 years. I'm here to share what I've learned and to help. I have guests every week on the show who are also willing to share their stories and advice and resources. This week's guest is Troy Vosseller. He's the co-founder of an accelerator based in Madison, Wisconsin called Gener8tor. And just so you know, the numeral 8 is in Gener8tor. It's an award-winning business accelerator, and Troy is here to talk with us this week about the role of accelerators, when an accelerator might be right for your business, some of the advantages they offer, and also some of the differences between different accelerators. Now, Troy, by way of introduction, is the co-founder of Gener8tor. It's a turnkey platform for the creative economy that connects startup founders, musicians, artists, investors, universities, and businesses. The Gener8tor platform includes pre-accelerators, accelerators, corporate programming, conferences, and fellowships, and I'm sure Troy will share with us the differences between each of those. Gener8tor operates more than 25 accelerators annually across North America, working with more than 100 startups every year. To date, Gener8tor has worked with more than 500 startups, and those startups in combination have gone on to raise more than $500 million in follow-on financing and employ more than 5,000 people. Troy came to Gener8tor from the University of Wisconsin, and there he was at the University of Wisconsin's Law School Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic, which was a program providing free legal services to startup businesses and entrepreneurs. Troy was also an undergraduate at the UW, where he founded what he says is the most cliche student startup imaginable, a t-shirt company. And yet, a tribute to Troy's entrepreneurial skills, it was a success, and today the company called Scotty Nation continues to market a line of apparels that focuses on celebrating the Wisconsin lifestyle. Now, before discovering his love of startups, Troy held brief stints at Qualcomm and Intuit. He has a BA, an MBA, and a JD from the UW-Madison. Troy, thanks so much for being on the show today. Welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur Show.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Doris.
Thank you for being with us. You know, I think the most natural place to start is to talk about what an accelerator is and isn't.
You bet. So when we think of the word accelerator, we contrast that with the word incubator. So let me kind of compare and contrast the two. When we think of an incubator, you know, typically that's more of a real estate play. It's about shared office or co-working space and some shared amenities. That could be anything from a shared, you know, reception function to shared printing services, you name it. An accelerator is all of that, meaning we have office space in these 23 different cities across North America in which we operate. We provide office space for the startups and entrepreneurs that we work with. But then we're also providing an investment. So for our flagship programs, we're actually investing cash in exchange for equity. So we're actually buying a small number of shares in each of the startups that we work with through our flagship programs. And therefore, we have aligned incentives with those startups, with those entrepreneurs. So we're only successful when those companies ultimately are successful because we own some of their stock and we share in that upside with them.
Interesting. Thanks for that. So Talk about your involvement and Gener8tor in particular. Why did you decide to co-found Gener8tor? What was the unmet need that you saw?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned in the intro, I had the fortune of starting this very cliche T-shirt company in college. So literally selling screen printed T-shirts with Scani emblazoned across the chest during my college years, and so that is what really led me down this entrepreneurial career path, if you will. So from there, my network expanded, my relationships grew, and more doors opened in terms of that entrepreneurial journey. And so that being said, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I enrolled in law school at UW-Madison. But about halfway through my first semester, I realized I didn't love it. I didn't really want to do that. And so I was lucky to be able to do and complete my MBA at the business school simultaneously, also at UW-Madison. And it was that hybrid of both business and law that I really did enjoy. I really did like. And so when I graduated, I joined the faculty at the UW Law School. It was a relatively new program called the Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic, which was a free program providing free legal services to small business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, you name it. And law students, upper level law students, would actually be the ones providing those services. So I was lucky to be what was called a supervising attorney to oversee the work of these law students as they were working with startups and entrepreneurs. And so that's really kind of let's call it the genesis of Gener8tor. From there, I got to meet my co-founder, my business partner, Joe Kurgis. Now, Joe was also a lawyer, and he was representing some folks on the investor side, so angel investors. And we met actually by working on some mutual transactions together, both, myself and my law students on the startup side, himself and his clients on the investor side. And from there, we just kind of hit it off personally and professionally. And I'd say, Doris, that we had a shared ground perspective that there just lacked a lot of efficiency for an entrepreneur to go from idea to incorporation to growth to raising venture capital. And we just thought all that could be made much, much more efficient. And I'd say in parallel, we had been admirers of what became known as the accelerator model. So, for example, one of the people we really looked up to was Paul Graham, who was the founder of Y Combinator, far and away the most successful and kind of godfather status of the accelerator genre, if you will, and said, hey, I think we can do that here in Wisconsin. And so, Joe and I, my business partner and I, we quit our jobs. We were fortunate to find a group of investors out of the Milwaukee area, and we have been running Gener8tor since then, since 2012.
Phenomenal. Well, you never looked back since, I guess. I think as opposed to maybe incubators or shared office co-worker spaces where the business model is more about your business, you pay money if you want to park yourself and be part of that organization. Because you're taking equity, I assume you're a lot pickier about the companies that join your accelerator. What are you looking for when you talk with companies who are interested in being part of Gener8tor?
Yeah, you bet. It is an investment exercise for us. So we actually manage other people's money. So we have limited partners, investors who invest into our fund. So we have a fiduciary duty to therefore invest into what we believe are the best opportunities, the best startups with the best potential. And so for our flagship Gener8tor programs, we operate that in Madison, Milwaukee, Beloit, the Twin Cities, Cincinnati, and Lincoln, Nebraska. So that's our flagship model. For that model, we're investing $100,000 into each startup that goes through the program. And in terms of what we're looking for, I really like this line, and this is from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. He talks about formidable. I'm looking for entrepreneurs that are formidable, and he gives kind of anecdotal, narrative-based ways of defining that. But for him, it kind of boiled down to, is this someone who gets their way in life? Meaning it's this perfect blend of capability, aptitude, emotional intelligence, IQ, EQ, and perseverance, creativity, curiosity, kind of all those things boiled together. And so fundamentally, we're looking for great people, great teams to invest in. Ultimately, if we're not investing in good people, no matter how good your idea or how good your market is, ultimately you have a lesser chance of success. And so we're looking for the team. We're looking for a large and growing market. is this something that could potentially be $100 million or $1 billion business at some point in the future if people execute well and the market moves in that direction? And then, all things being equal, we're looking for traction, and that could be product development milestones, that could be users, subscribers, customers, revenue, kind of you name it. And I like to think about that as, prove to me that the dog will eat the dog food. And
in other words, if you build it, they will come mentality is probably not going to cut it.
Typically not, although certainly we have invested in companies that are pre-product, pre-revenue, where we've come to really know the founders and believe in what they're doing and their capability and aptitude around that. But again, all things being equal, we see thousands of ideas. In some cases, we get more than 1,000 applications, from which we're only selecting 5 companies to invest into. So we go from 1,000 down to 5. And so for us, we see so many ideas that I'm so, let's call it, immune to what makes a good idea. Meaning I'm willing to believe anything can be a good business or a good business model. And it comes down to that execution piece and proving it. And if it's so obvious, go out and build it, go out, develop it, go out and get customers, go out and get revenue and sales and go from there.
Well, you just answered my next question, which was how many businesses apply every year and how many you take. But how do these companies come to you? How do they find you? And what's your process for evaluating all those hundreds of applications you get?
Sure. When we started in 2012, we were brand new. And so we didn't have a track record. We didn't really have any word of mouth or brand affinity, brand recognition around what we were doing. And so for our first cohort, this is the summer of 2012, and the program took place in Milwaukee. We had about 90 applications, and all of them were from southeastern Wisconsin, all from kind of the greater Milwaukee metro area. And I think that was to be expected. Again, we were new. But, as the years marched on, we were fortunate to get some positive outcomes for our alumni, for our portfolio companies. And that's everything from connecting them with great mentors, great corporate partners, great investors, helping them grow in terms of customers and revenue, helping them grow in terms of follow-on venture capital financing. And as we were able to produce those positive outcomes, the word of mouth spread. And so, now we're getting applicants from the Twin Cities, from Chicago, from Detroit, and kind of you can think of it as we were building concentric circles outward from our base in Wisconsin. And as a result, our number of applicants went up. So we went from about 90 applications in 2012, our first program, to today we get more than 1,000 applications per program. But always been, we focus on this concierge, what we call a concierge model of just working with 5 startups at a time. So more granularly, today we're fortunate to get a lot of inbound applicants, people who have heard about us, people who have been referred to our programs. But then we really pride ourselves on a lot of proactive outbound recruiting. So today we have a staff of more than 60 full-time employees.
That's great. Wow.
Yeah, and so they're really deputized, even though they all run their own respective programs. They're all deputized to help recruit for these flagship programs when we're in operation. So that includes everything from scrolling through business plan competitions, university databases of entrepreneurs and startups, some of these national databases like AngelList or F-Success or Crunchbase, just looking for entrepreneurs that we think are stage appropriate and might have some mutual interest in what we're doing at Gener8tor. And then during normal times, when travel was open, our employees would post up in different markets. So, we'd go to Chicago for 2 days and we'd post up at a coffee shop or a co-working space, and we'd recruit entrepreneurs to come sign up for, a 30-minute time slot to meet with us and tell us about their business and ask any questions about Gener8tor. And we would literally host these office hours in cities, throughout North America. And that was a really successful approach as well.
It's hard getting started, but once you do start, it's amazing how word of mouth helps, because I'm sure you've had investors and lawyers and all sorts of people refer businesses to you, because once they know you're out there and that you're really doing a good job, people are always looking for funding when they're starting up a business. And so anybody who can help them with that is a popular person, right?
Absolutely.
You mentioned a couple times that these are the flagship companies and that it's a concierge model with really 5 companies that you really focus on and nurture. But I'm gathering with all the different platforms in different cities that you have, that you have other business models too. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so to put a finer point, when I say flagship, that's really the core work that we do. It's what we originally started with, and it remains kind of what people know Gener8tor for. And so let's just using Wisconsin as an example, we operate 3 flagship programs per year in Wisconsin, one in Milwaukee, one in Madison, and one in Beloit. And from there, there's kind of 2 flavors of program. So in all cases, we're investing $100,000. In some of those programs, we call it our traditional model. It's where we are recruiting existing startups. And by that, I mean, typically there's already an entity formed, incorporated. They already have a team. There's already typically a product or service that's being developed. And it's in many cases, it already has customers and revenue. So that's for existing startups. They apply to that traditional program. We also, starting last year, so for a little over a year now, we've been running what we call an accelerator studio program. And so what that is actually going pre-company. So rather than having an existing startup apply, we have individuals and teams apply explicitly without an idea. And then we select what we believe are the best 5 individuals and teams. We invest $100,000 again, and then we help them build a business from scratch. So
wow,
2 models.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we bucket both of those models under the flagship moniker. In addition, we have pre-accelerator programs. So these operate under the name G-Beta. So you can think of G-Beta standing for Gener8tor Beta, and those are all exclusively for local companies. So this is the broadest program that we operate. So when we talk about being in 23 different cities, that means we have a G-Beta in each of those cities. And for the most part, those G-Beta programs focus exclusively on local companies. So for the flagship Gener8tor programs, we're recruiting internationally, worldwide, for the best startups for the traditional program, for the best individuals or teams for the studio program. And then for earlier stage companies, we have our G-Beta pre-accelerator program, and those tend to be exclusively focused on local companies. So that's a bit of the distinction. I'll also point out that for G-Beta, the pre-accelerator, we actually don't invest. So we're not investing, but we don't take any equity and we don't charge any fees. So G-Beta is a completely free program. There's, you don't have to give up any equity. There's no tuition or fees or anything associated with it. It's meant to just, how can, we leverage our network and relationships and experiences and apply that to even more startups at a local level at the top of the funnel, if you will.
Wow. So a couple questions though. Are you looking for particular kinds of industries?
Yeah. Well, most of our programs, I'll preface by saying all of our programs focus on what we believe can be a venture-backable startup. And by that, I mean, it's not your typical one-off restaurant or barbershop or coffee store. What we're looking for is something that can, if it's successful, and that's a big if, right? We know the failure rate is very high, but if they're successful in both execution and bringing this to market and market, absorbing it, this could be something really, really big. And, I said earlier, loosely, can that be something that's at least 100 million or even $1 billion opportunity at scale? So a good example might be, let's use like a consumer packaged good item. There might be a company locally that's developed a really unique organic peanut butter. I'm just making this up. Right. And, to start with, that might just be sold at local farmers markets or in, a couple boutique type retailers and grocery stores locally. For us, the job is to say, well, what does the entrepreneur aspire to and what are they capable of? Is this just always going to be kind of a lifestyle business, a more traditional small business locally and can be very successful and profitable? Or could this be the next RX bar or, big hit consumer product at the national level? And so that's what we're looking for. Someone who desires and has a vision towards a high degree of scalability in what they're doing. And that could be anything from physical products like the consumer packaged goods, genre to more traditional B2B software as a service, e-commerce plays. We've done hardware, Internet of Things, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics. We're very much industry and business model agnostic in terms of what we're doing. And for the most part, Doris, we want our cohorts to have a very diverse mix. So maybe that looks like one e-commerce company, one consumer packaged good company, one life sciences company, one B2B SaaS company. And so we're kind of looking for that blended mix with a few exceptions. So we do run a couple industry specific programs. So I'll rattle them off. We run a program specifically for InsurTech. We run a program explicitly for education and workforce innovation, one for MedTech, medical devices and related technologies, music tech, so these are music technology startups, ag techs for the agriculture industry, and I'm probably missing some that I'm delinquent on. We've done them for 5G wireless technology, ag bioscience, but that gives you a flavor. So we have run, and we do continue to run a couple industry-specific programs, but for the most part, we have industry-agnostic programs. And so if you're an entrepreneur coming to us and you're going to Gener8tor.com, there's going to be a lot of different programs that you can learn about and access no matter what you're doing.
My understanding, at least, is that is maybe a distinction between Gener8tor and some other accelerators, because I think there are accelerators that just focus on, for example, software development, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what most people think of when they hear an accelerator. They think, I'm maybe not a good fit because I'm not in IT, and that just sounds like that's a misconception people may have.
Yes, I would agree. And some of our most successful companies, they're not in, what I would call traditional software. Now, that being said, every business today has a technology component. So whether it's the channels in which you sell that, be it e-commerce or some sort of digital delivery, to how you market and acquire customers and advertise, there's a technological element to every company. So it's hard, is Airbnb a hospitality company or a technology company? Is DoorDash a food company or a technology company, right? I mean, the lines really start to blur here, but the reality is technology underpins all of these companies, no matter what they're doing, and it's especially true at scale. And so that being said, you're right. There are a lot of accelerators that will only do, software as a service, or they only do hardware, or they only do food and beverage companies.
Right.
But for the most part, our programs are industry agnostic, business model agnostic, and geographically agnostic. We're looking for what we think are the best opportunities, no matter what the business is and no matter where they're coming from.
I'm curious too about the kinds of services that Gener8tor offers for businesses that are part of the platform. Talk a little bit about some of the kinds of services, both maybe the more measurable stuff, but also I'm sure there's some advantages that are kind of hard to quantify, but they're real.
Sure. Well, I mentioned there's definitely the real estate component. Now, that being said, all of our programs have converted entirely to a virtual format, and they'll continue to be for the near future here. But normally, pre-COVID, we are providing free office space to all the entrepreneurs that we work with. And so there's a big community element. There's kind of this positive peer pressure, I would call it, that's shared amongst a cohort of entrepreneurs and startups working together. For our G-Beta program, it's a 7-week program. For our flagship Gener8tor programs, it's a 12 to 16-week program. But the building blocks, which I'll describe, are pretty much the same across both of them. And those building blocks are, you can kind of view the program in 3 components. The first is around mentorship. And so we curate mentors to come in and meet one-on-one with each of the startups, with each of the entrepreneurs that we work with. And these mentors range from, serial entrepreneurs like yourself, Doris, to subject matter experts, alumni of Gener8tor, so people that can say, well, I was in your shoes at one point and I went through this program. They include investors, so past investors in Gener8tor companies, and then subject matter experts. So maybe it's someone who's really good at digital marketing, for example. So that's the mentorship piece. The second piece is really around advising, where we facilitate one-on-one team meetings. So at least twice a week, our staff member, our director focused on that program, is meeting one-on-one with each of those 5 startups. And it's everything from, helping them issue spot and flag potential roadblocks or things that they should be considering that maybe they haven't noticed, to letting the entrepreneur direct the meeting. And maybe it's around, hey, I could really use expertise or advice in this particular area. And then our job is one of air traffic control. Sometimes we might know the answer, or we can have an informed discussion about a topic. In other cases, we might not know, but hopefully someone in our broader network is the perfect person for them to talk to. And even if they're not in our network, our job is to go fishing, go hunting for that entrepreneur to get access to whatever the resources that they need. And that can be at a high level, a very strategic level. Maybe it's saying, we need our product endorsed by a major record label, and so let's see if we can navigate into a senior vice president at XYZ company, all the way to the more tactical. hey, we're struggling with how the taxation of cryptocurrencies on our payment processing platform. How can you connect us with, a CPA that understands that new space? So that's the second component. So biweekly team meetings. The third component then is around investment. So we help these startups put together and polish a pitch deck along with a narrative, a voiceover in terms of how to actually pitch their company to investors. And then we take them on a roadshow. We call this the investor swarm. And so during the investor swarm, we set up one-on-one pitch meetings between each of those 5 startups and investors in our network. And so for that flagship program, each of those 5 companies can expect to pitch at least 85 unique investors. And these range from, individual angel investors to angel groups and angel networks to VCs, corporate VCs, family offices, kind of you name it. And they're pitching investors that are located throughout the country.
What a phenomenal opportunity. Well, Troy, I want you to hold your thoughts for just a second. We need to take a quick break right now for station identification and a word from a few of our sponsors. This is Doris Nagel, and you're listening to the Savvy Entrepreneur Show. This week, our guest is Troy Vosseller, who's the co-founder of an accelerator called Gener8tor with the numeral 8 as the 8 in the generator. So, Troy, before the break, we were talking about some of the key programs and services that Gener8tor offers to companies that are part of your community. One group in particular that I'd love to talk a little bit more about, because I think it's pretty unique for accelerators, is your focus on businesses in the arts. It's near and dear to my heart, but it's also intriguing because that's probably an area where I think people would not think about being part of an accelerator. And yet you have a whole program that's been very successful. Talk a little bit more about how that came to be and what that entails.
You bet. So for the vast majority of our 8-year history, what we started with and what continues to be what we're most known for is our work around accelerating high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurs and startups kind of in that traditional definition. But about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, my business partner and I, we took a step back and we asked ourselves, what's a category of entrepreneur that we think is particularly underserved? And we stumbled upon artists and musicians. And what was interesting is, we do a lot of work with corporations, specifically around corporate venture capital and corporate innovation. And we have a whole peer-to-peer group focused on the corporate innovation side of the house. But increasingly, those corporations were also asking us about ecosystem development and tech talent recruitment and millennial attraction and retention from a workforce development standpoint. And so as I made the earlier comment that no matter what your business is today, it will have a heavy tech component no matter what. I don't care if you're selling insurance or organic peanut butter, there's technology involved at some point in that process, at almost all points in that process. And so if you're, let's call it a legacy, an incumbent, large employer in any community across America, you're looking to attract and retain the best talent. And so it dawned on us to say a heavy element is, I would almost make the argument that the job is almost a commodity, meaning there's plenty of 6-figure jobs for computer science graduates in any city in America. And so then the question becomes, why would I want to stay in my city? Or why would I want to move to another city to pursue my line of work? And I think a lot of that has less to do with the job and more to do with the atmosphere, the ecosystem, and the culture. So we really stuck on this word culture. Like, how do we focus on creative placemaking? And so it dawned on us to say, if you're a tech entrepreneur, you have a fairly increasingly defined path to go from an incubator or accelerator to angel financing to venture capital financing, et cetera, kind of on down the path. But if you're an artist and musician, there doesn't quite exist the exact same path or set of resources. And if anything,
right.
If anything, most of the resources that exist for these artists and musicians tend to be kind of charity cases, if you will.
I was going to say, I doubt many venture capital firms in New York or in Silicon Valley have invested much in the arts and entertainment, but I could be wrong. But anyway, continue your story.
That's a good aside, Doris, because the word angel investor, at least this is the story I was told, actually came from Broadway. So this notion of someone who was a producer, someone who bankrolled a play, a production on Broadway, became to be known as an angel, someone who would come down and provide the funding to put on a production, put on a play on Broadway. And so, in fact, the word that we use today to talk about angel investor, which is very tied to tech entrepreneurship, is rooted in the arts. So I often find some comfort in that backstory. But, for us was, how do we accomplish two goals? How do we apply the accelerator model, which in my opinion has been very successful at fostering the formation and growth of tech startups? And how do we apply that to a different type of entrepreneur, in this case, artists and musicians? As a second order outcome, how can we help create more cultural activation, cultural activity in a given community as a means of helping attract and retain population, primarily millennial tech talent? And so, that was really kind of the genesis behind our art and music program. So today we operate two programs. The first is called Gener8tor Music. So Gener8tor Music is an accelerator for musicians and bands. We operate Gener8tor Music in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland. In Detroit, we have a really special, unique relationship with Motown and Motown Records. So we actually call it the Motown Accelerator, which is pretty cool in my opinion. And we get to work with the teams at Motown Records and Capitol Music Group and Universal Music Group, as well as the Motown Museum. So we get to, play off the such richness and history and legacy of Motown. And then the second program is for visual artists, and we call that program Fellowship.art. And today we only operate in Milwaukee, but we're looking forward to hopefully expanding it to other communities. And that focuses on visual artists. So that could be everything from painters to photographers, filmmakers, and other, mixed media genres that we're interested in. And so for each of those programs, I do want to clarify, we structure it as a fellowship. So we give them a grant. We don't take any equity. We don't take any royalties or residuals. Our goal is to purely provide funding for artists and musicians to view themselves through this lens of entrepreneurship. They are building a business. And so, the program is less focused on musicality or artistry and more focused on, how do you build that business? And it's everything from how do you pitch your craft to how do you build a social media following to what are different or creative ways to get your art out into the public and how can you monetize that art?
Amazing, amazing. What a fun and visionary program. So I'm really glad to hear you doing it. Your bio says you've worked with and helped over 500 companies, I think. Talk about some of the successes that you've had and some of the things that are common about these that have caused you to look at it and go, these are probably some pretty good indicators of success.
Sure. I'll give two examples. So, one of the most creative companies we've ever invested in is a company called Pretty Litter, which is subscription cat litter. So, so imagine, if you own a cat, especially for folks in urban environments, it might be a hassle to go shopping for, especially a clay-based cat litter that might be heavy. And historically, it's been kind of difficult or expensive to ship, through UPS or FedEx or the post office because of the weight. Mm-hmm. But it's a consumable product. Every month or at a certain time interval, you need to replenish your cat litter. It's just something you have to do. And so Pretty Litter had really kind of two business model innovations. The first was, let's make it subscription and delivered, and they do it via crystal-based cat litter. So because it's kind of a crystalline-based cat litter, it's significantly lighter. It makes the economics of shipping it and transporting it much, much more efficient and effectual. So that's the first thing, and you can get it on subscription, so it's going to be delivered every month. The second thing, so I would call that a little bit more evolutionary in terms of what they were doing. The second component of their business model innovation was much more revolutionary, is that they added a diagnostic component. So this crystalline-based cat litter is treated in such a way that it will change color based on the acidity and alkalinity of the cat's urine. And then that becomes an early health indicator for a variety of diseases or infections that your cat may have to trigger you to take your cat to the vet. And
wow.
Cool. So that's a really unique thing. So not only I'm intrigued to buy this product because I can get it on a subscription, it's lightweight, it's delivered to my door every month, but now there's this added benefit that it has this health diagnostic component, which makes me as the cat owner feel, much more secure or confident about my cat's health. And if my cat's not healthy, I'd like to know so I can take it to the vet. So that company, when they joined us, was doing tens of thousands of dollars of monthly revenue. today they'll end this year, with tens of millions in annual revenue. So they've just grown phenomenally. And I think it's just such a great example of kind of the creativity that is entrepreneurship.
Well, so are they even part of your accelerator, or have they graduated essentially?
Yeah, they graduated. So they went through our program in 2016. The company is actually based in Los Angeles. They participated in our Gener8tor program in Milwaukee in 2016, and they've just continued to grow since then. And even though companies, out of our program, to be clear, we're not working with them day to day, but we stay in touch with all these companies. And so it might be us texting them or brainstorming with them or helping them make a decision. And so we always want to be a strategic advisor with these companies, even years out of having been formally in the accelerator.
Well, you remain an investor too in these companies, right?
Yeah. So and that's what I mean. We get to share in the upside, and that's both. I'd say for me, the most exciting component of this job is seeing both an entrepreneur and a startup go from a much more nascent stage to just really growing and seeing the delight in their customers, seeing them grow in terms of headcount, creating jobs. And ultimately, the end game is can we make these companies either profitable or acquired at some point where, that wealth goes to the founder, to the employees of that company, certainly to our investors. And then can we repeat that cycle? Can we reinvest both the institutional knowledge developed from building a very successful high growth company, as well as the wealth that was created from that process? Can we reinvest that back into the community?
Right. And then create programs like the fellowships you were talking about for artists, which is, obviously, wow, talk about a time where artists and people in performing and visual arts need help, because a lot of them are struggling. So phenomenal. So, all right. So we digress, because I know you were about to give me another example of a success story.
Yeah, another good example. It's a company more locally. They're based in Madison, called Understory. And it came to us through a student who recently earned his master's degree in atmospheric sciences from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And, we started down this path of, he had a couple different ideas initially, all, related to weather conditions, either air pollution or wind. And so eventually we said, what's something you know more than anyone else? What do you know more than anyone else? And he said, all my master's degree research was around hail. And we said, well, that's unique, but, tell us about hail. And he says, the status quo is that hail is measured at the satellite level when hail is in the clouds, but we don't have a lot of what meteorologists call ground truth of where that hail actually lands. And when it's hailing, it tends to be, severe weather conditions, a lot of wind, thunderstorms, etc. And so the distance between where that hail is detected in the cloud to where it falls on the ground can even be a disparate distance of miles because of the wind conditions. And so we said, well, that's interesting. How could we solve that? And so he developed a hardware device that's essentially a weather station that accurately detects ground strike hail. So it looks like a sphere with strain gauges on the inside, and it detects the presence, size, and velocity of that hail. And then they're deployed in a mesh-like grid, which allows them to have more granular readings about where that hail actually landed to improve both weather predictions. But then there's a whole nother line of business, which is around insurance. So today they offer
exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Insurance companies would love this.
So today they offer products, everything from auto insurers, including car dealers who have a lot of automobiles to insure on their lots during potentially a hailstorm, to new roofs on homes and businesses, as you can imagine, and even crop insurance, how hail can have damaging effect on agricultural crops. And so again, that's an example of a company that started as really pre-product, pre-revenue. Our program was fortunate to be able to work with that entrepreneur, invest in the company, help get this idea off the ground. And today they've just been going gangbusters. And so they've raised, tens of millions of dollars from the likes of True Ventures, RRE Ventures, 4490 Ventures, Rise of the Rest, which is backed by Steve Case, the founder of AOL. And they just continue to have a lot of success in what they're doing.
Phenomenal. All right. So looking back, you've seen just hundreds of companies that have pitched to you, and you've seen successes and obviously some failures. If you're a startup company and you're thinking about pitching to a pitch competition or pitching to an accelerator, what are the most common mistakes and what things can entrepreneurs or should they be thinking about doing to improve their chances of success?
Yeah, my advice would be really focused on action. The reality is that entrepreneurship is, some would say a full contact sport. It's not a spectator sport. It takes, now certainly that doesn't mean planning's not involved, but you still need, a plan is nothing unless you put it into motion. And I think too often entrepreneurs kind of build this perfect watch, or perfect clock, if you will, where everything's set. They have this verbose business plan, and it's based on so many assumptions on top of assumptions on top of assumptions, and it's never been really stress tested. And so I'm a big believer in the lean startup theory and movement, which is really predicated on what is the most fundamental assumption to your business, and you should go out and validate that. And that could be everything from talking to customers to setting up landing pages to taking pre-orders. There's all different ways you can think about this or do it. But what I don't want is entrepreneurs to delude themselves into thinking kind of this notion of if you build it, they will come. And, I'm going to set up everything. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to flick this light switch and everything moves into motion and happens perfectly. The reality is it's much more ugly than that. And the reality is most of your assumptions are probably wrong. Sometimes you'll get them all right. And if you build it, they will come does work, but usually it doesn't. And you're much better off just going out there and testing your assumption. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, just human nature is such that you tend to revert back to your core competency. So if I'm an engineer, I want to focus on engineering a product, more engineering cycles. If I'm a developer, I want to focus on programming and writing more code. But typically, you should be focused on your blind spot, which for most people is talking to customers. It's going out and selling and focusing on those pieces. And so the sooner you can do that and the sooner you can get more comfortable with that, or augment your team by bringing someone else in to do that part for you or partnering with you, the better. Because I hate to see, entrepreneurs with, again, I think any idea can be a great idea, but it really comes down to both execution and market viability. Will the dog eat the dog food?
Mm-hmm. What about some of the common weaknesses you see in some of the pitches? Because I have a feeling that you come across some really phenomenal ideas, but either it's not presented very well or not organized very well, or maybe there's a credibility problem.
Yeah. I'd say I hope that our team can do a somewhat decent job of seeing through either a bad pitch. If we believe that the entrepreneurs are really formidable and there's a great business, a great idea there, my hope is that we can see through, things like a bad pitch. That being said, a good pitch only helps you. And so a pitch very much is important. And, I'd say some of the, these are some common pitfalls will be just not understanding your market enough. You need to be the most obsessed person about what you're doing, because the investor might be more of a generalist. Even if they are a specialist in your industry, you need to prove that you know more about this than anyone else and just be obsessed with it and is just insatiably curious about what you're doing. What I would hate to see, so let me give you like a flagrant example of this. What I would hate to see is an entrepreneur come and pitch something, and during the pitch, maybe as the investor or potential investor, I'm going to Google a couple keywords and see a bunch of different results of competitors. And if I ask you about those competitors and either you've never heard of them or you claim that they're not competitors, that's going to raise some red flags in my book. Because again, like if I'm just sitting here Googling it hearing it for the first time, and you haven't necessarily thought about this, well, that I worry about how obsessed you are with this problem or how curious you are about what you're doing.
Exactly. Well, Gener8tor has grown and evolved over the years. Talk about how the accelerator has changed and the programs have changed over the years.
Yeah, you bet. I'd say our footprint has grown a lot. We started as a very much local Wisconsin program. Today we're in 13 states and provinces, 2 countries, both the US and Canada. And so the kind of the scale of what we're doing has grown. So just like, we want to practice what we preach, right, Doris? Like, if we're telling our entrepreneurs to grow and scale and find new markets and new customers, we have tried to be self-reflective of that as well and kind of eating our own dog food. I realize I'm using this dog food analogy a lot.
You must like dogs, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm allergic to that. I don't even like dogs, but
no.
we'll use it. So we've scaled a lot, and that's giving us just a much broader network. And so a lot of the markets in which we operate are what I would call secondary or tertiary markets. And the unfortunate reality is that 79% of all venture capital goes to just 3 states. So that's California, New York, and Massachusetts. And even more granularly, you could almost say that 79% of venture capital goes to just a handful of zip codes centered around, the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley, New York City, and Boston, right? And yet venture capital, we know empirically, is just such a tremendous source of growth and a highly levered asset class. So if you look at recent IPOs or the S&P 500, the Fortune 500, the number of venture-backed companies relative to venture capital's percentage of GDP is just staggering. It's something like 0.1% of GDP, and yet venture-backed companies comprise like 25% of all private sector employment. So it has a tremendous ratcheting effect, and yet it's not getting into most of America. And so,
right,
we
and there are good ideas everywhere and smart teams of people with great ideas everywhere, right?
I agree. And so a lot of it is, how do we create density and create network effects when we don't have them in just Milwaukee or just Madison or just Minneapolis, right? And so for us, we're able to aggregate all these cities together. So these 23 cities in which we operate, they're not Silicon Valley or New York or Boston. They're all outside of those markets. So how can we aggregate those together so that resources can be a little bit more fluid and fungible? So you might be a great startup in Indianapolis, and through the Gener8tor network, you can access a mentor in Cincinnati, or a corporate partner in Detroit, or an investor in Toronto, or a customer in Houston. These are all cities in which we operate in. And so by aggregating that network together, we think we're giving entrepreneurs in secondary markets just a much healthier chance at being successful.
That is phenomenal. Look out to the next 3 to 5 years, and if you're successful, what does Gener8tor look like?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think we want to continue on this growth path. We started in 2 markets. Today we're in 23. I would love to see that number double, because I think that more than doubles our impact, in these underserved markets. Certainly we have an eye towards ROI. We want our investments to ultimately be successful. We're only successful when the startups that we invest in are successful. So seeing some real strong successes on the startup exit, liquidity, acquisition front. And then we continue to explore new product lines and new ways of helping entrepreneurs. So the Gener8tor Music and Fellowship.art programs are a great example. This year, during the pandemic, we launched a program called Gener8tor Upskilling, where we partnered with Microsoft and LinkedIn to provide free digital skill upskilling for and underemployed individuals. And then we help connect them with jobs that leverage these digital skill sets. That's everything from computer programming to online customer service. So I think we're constantly challenging ourselves on what are new pathways that we can be relevant. And it all comes back to our mission, which I'm remiss that I didn't start with that. But our mission is, at Gener8tor, we want to be the best partner for a community to invest in its best and brightest. And if we're myopically only focused on high-tech, high-growth, venture-backable startups, that's such a small sliver of what makes up the richness of a community. And yet all these things are intertwined. I go back to that example of, if I'm a computer science graduate, young person recently out of college, I might have the pick of my litter of high-paying jobs in that field. And so it comes down to, where do I want to live? And that could be everything from the lifestyle, the availability of housing, the overall economy, the arts, music, and culture scene. And so we want to make sure that we're playing a role across that full spectrum within the communities in which we operate.
Well, one of the things you've been very modest about is that I know Gener8tor has won a number of awards. In fact, it's considered one of the top accelerator groups in the country. Talk about the metrics that are used to give accelerators a ranking. On what basis are the awards given?
Sure.
Because obviously you're doing some things very right.
We keep trying. The report that you're referring to, there's an annual report called the Seed Accelerator Rankings Project. And so this is an academic piece of research. It's put on by some professors from Rice University and MIT who do this annual ranking. And for the last 4 years, Gener8tor has been ranked amongst the top 15 accelerator programs in the country. And what I take a lot of pride in is that, A, we're the youngest in that top 15 in terms of when we started. And second of all, we're the only accelerator ranked in the top 15 that does not operate in a top 10 metro market. So again, I go back to, we're not in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston or these main venture capital hubs. We're in these secondary markets. And so, we take a lot of pride in being able to say, we can do this national caliber work here in the Midwest, here in these underserved markets. As for what they're looking at, it's a combination of quantitative and qualitative. So on the quantitative side, we have to do a confidential data disclosure about everything from all the companies we've invested in, what are their current valuations, how much follow-on financing have they raised, how soon after they graduate from our accelerator do they raise those financings, who has been acquired, how much are they acquired for. So that's on the quantitative side.
Wow. So yeah, a lot of metrics. This isn't just like they
Absolutely.
stick their finger up in the air and see, what feels good. This is serious stuff. And so kudos to you, Troy, and the whole team at Gener8tor. So I knew the hour was going to fly by, and it has. And so one final question before we let you go is, if people are interested in learning more about Gener8tor and its programs, maybe they're trying to figure out whether an accelerator at all is the right fit for them. Maybe they just want to brainstorm about some of the other resources that are available for entrepreneurs in their local ecosystem, whether it's the Wisconsin ecosystem or elsewhere in some of the markets you operate. What's the best way for them to reach you or someone else at Gener8tor to help them get started?
You bet. So the first resource I recommend to people is hit up our website, Gener8tor.com. That's spelled Gener, the number 8, TOR.com. And the second means would be email. So my email is Troy, TROY, @Gener8tor.com. Again, that's GENER, the number 8, TOR.com.
Fantastic. Well, Troy, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
taking the time to share some of the great things that are going on at Gener8tor.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right, folks, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. And thanks especially again today to our guest, Troy Vosseller, co-founder of Gener8tor, the highly acclaimed accelerator based in Wisconsin. Now, you can find more helpful information and resources on my website for entrepreneurs, globalocityservices.com. There's a library there of free blogs and tools, podcasts, and other resources. Now, because this show is for you, my listeners, my door is always open. I would love to hear from you. If you have comments, questions, challenges, or just want to share a great resource, or just shoot the breeze, please email me at dnagel, Nagel, at lakes plural, lakesradio.org. I promise I'll respond. Be sure to join me again next Saturday at 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern, when we'll have another great guest and topic. But until then, I'm Doris Nagel, wishing you happy entrepreneuring.